Thank you. All righty. Let's see, that button? No, that button. Hey, there we go. All right, so yes, I'm speaking primarily on the differences with the energy code that Denver adopted in their amendments. There's plenty of other increases from the 2015 IECC to the 2018 IECC. That's a whole nother hour-long presentation. So we'll just talk about the amendments in particular. We've already mentioned that the R2 occupancies, all R2 occupancies are now commercial. It used to be that in three-story buildings, it was within the energy code, it was included in residential, and as was mentioned, it was a lot easier to comply with. Now within Denver, even the three-story R buildings are included. One of the biggies that we're definitely going to be seeing, and we're going to be having some learning curve on, is indeed the building envelope upgrades. First of all, in general, the IECC has stepped it up a bit, but in addition, Denver has added a full, true commissioning requirement to air barriers in particular. What that means is there's going to be a design review that probably generally an architect, envelope consultant will have to do and confirm all the locations of the air barrier details. You know, going through, and that's not going to work on the screen, is it? Going through and finding all the locations, the details of windows to walls, floors to walls, making sure that we've got a full continuous air barrier. Then there's going to be inspections and a report saying that yes or no, the building did comply with the contract documents, just like commissioning and mechanical has been. Envelope testing. Previously, there was some ways that if you did, and still within the base building code, if you take a few, you can do it the prescriptive way, or you can do it a more performance way, and then test to confirm. Within Denver, all buildings are going to be required to be tested, except for I occupancy buildings, and that's probably a good thing because especially during remodels, many II hospitals are required to maintain building pressure relationships, and putting a big fan on one end of the building is probably not very conducive to maintaining those building pressure relationships. One thing that, of course, so what are you going to do with a very large building? It has been addressed that you would do the top floor, any floor with entries to it, any floor that has an exposed floor like the above a parking garage or something, or an overhang, and then 25% of the additional square footage of the envelope on all the other floors has to be tested. But that's what it is. It's really putting a fan on each floor of a building and measuring the airflow. Yes, no, do we meet it? And as was mentioned, it's interesting how this will be enforced. It does say right in the code that thou shalt attempt to find and repair leakage and report on how badly, if indeed you're failing, I don't know how badly you're failing. Now, me personally, as a consultant, as an owner, I wouldn't force it. I mean, if you don't meet the project specs, you go back and do it over again. That's just me. IECC, or for the commissioning. Now, this is true across the board for mechanical, electrical systems. What Denver has done in general, this is a very good thing. I wouldn't call it necessarily a cost or something that's it's different perhaps in Denver, mainly because you got to do what you're supposed to do. What Denver did in the amendments is enhance the documentation requirements so we know what a commissioning report's supposed to be. If you're doing it right in the first place, this is not an impact. Added an exception. What was very nice, there's always a question about, do I have to commission this little job? Well, there's now a clear designation within the Denver amendments where that starts and stops, and therefore 10,000 square feet for lighting. If you're less than 20 kW and 10,000 square feet, again, do the math, that's 2 watts a square foot, so that's very high, and therefore if you're in a small remodel or small building, you probably are not going to be required to commission the building. There's also, within the base code, there's also some equipment size limitations as well. So energy recovery for mechanical is, well, first of all, outside airflow monitors, pretty much every type of basic system. I mean, there's the little bitty fan coil type of equipment won't have to have that, but the DOAS unit feeding them and most other types of air handling based systems will need to have outside airflow monitors. Minor cost, but it's different than outside of Denver. Heat recovery is the one main thing that Denver has added to the mechanical code. Essentially, for a high percentage outside air, I want to say 70% outside air above on a standard building, you're going to have a heat recovery unit. And if you're running a building that's a 24/7, you're going to have heat recovery on it as well. So hospitals, but that also means residential, right? Because you're always maintaining ventilation within a residential building as well. The other addition, one of the things that's probably going to hit residential buildings more than anything is these small little fart fans that you put in a bathroom now have an energy component to them. And generally, again, if you're buying the good stuff, it probably will meet. But the little, $30 fan that you get a whole truck full of at one time, no, that's not going to meet it. You're going to have to spend $200 to get a real fan to meet this energy code requirement. An interesting thing, definitely a Colorado thing, we've now identified, the marijuana industry is one of the largest energy users per square foot, and so this is now starting to be addressed in both lighting and in mechanical systems. And then large water heaters, this is actually a very minor addition. We went from 90 to 92%. That's when, generally that's going to be these large instantaneous water heaters that we see. Existing buildings, again, I'd call this a good thing because what the Denver amendments have done have aligned historic buildings, which of course Denver has a good share of, with other requirements that are addressed within the building code for historic. If you got to go to the historic building commission, and just like you might have an issue with egress, code required egress that you might be able to find a way out of. Same thing with the energy codes, but just like everything else, you've got to justify all this. But everything else is really clarifying things that were difficult for us to figure out what the requirements were. So I'm going to say that that's, again, a good thing. Documentation it will help us know what we're getting into. Then we've always had, and the base code has a requirement to declare, after you've done all these prescriptive requirements, you've got to choose in everywhere else one more additional energy package. Within Denver, you've got to pick 2 additional energy packages. More efficient HVAC, that's actually getting pretty difficult to do because we're already getting towards the top of the requirements anyway. Reduced lighting power density, that's easier to do and has been the go-to, but again, the baseline is being reduced on those to the point where LED is being expected, whereas it used to be that LED would blow away the lighting power allowance, and that would allow you to meet this. Lighting controls, similarly, a lot of these LED lights come with individually switchable controls, and that is an easy answer. So, but on-site renewable energy, you're obviously spending money for that. A DOAS unit, there's certain kinds of systems you probably would do a DOAS unit anyway, dedicated outside air. Domestic hot water, enhanced envelope performance, and reduced air infiltration are also additional ways you can do this. And I believe that the reduced air infiltration thing, you have to meet. You test it. It's the baseline testing is 0.4 CFM per square foot of exterior envelope, whereas the enhanced, I want to say, is 0.25, and it says you're going to test and meet 0.25 CFM per square foot. So one thing that comes out of Denver policy that, again, I call it a good thing because it tells us what they're looking for. The biggie is that they're looking for a separate set of energy plans, not just sticking the ComCheck in the mechanical, not just having envelope details on the architectural. The idea here is a set of energy plans to submit that can be looked at independently. That's where you want to list all your additional energy packages. This commissioning that was required for the envelope. This is where the analysis is supposed to show up. You coordinate with future phases. You've got a whole lot of shelf space, but of course all the energy, all the lighting was counted on within the TI space, right? So there's got to be a plan to coordinate all the TI with the current what you promised as far as how this building will meet energy code. The TIs have to follow on. And then, of course, you're going to have your commissioning checklist and your declaration of commissioning. And this is a good one, too. Something that has caught people up in the past is the owner or developer with the permit has to declare that, yes, we're commissioning it. This is the approved agency who's doing the commissioning. You can't get to the end of the job and say, well, who's doing the commissioning? No, you've got to declare up front in order to get your permit who is going to commission your building. And then, as a deferred submittal, you've got to do the preliminary commissioning report as well. We've talked about benchmarking. I just acknowledge that you got to do it if you're over 25,000 square feet. The green building ordinance was well established already, and the green building code. And again, I just want to reemphasize that the green building ordinance is a requirement in addition to the energy code. So you're going to have your energy code plans that you're submitting. You're also going to have a plan to comply with the Denver Energy Code. And I'm not that familiar with those submittal requirements, but it is a separate submittal, yes. So, and that's what I got.